My husband's mistress stood in the grand foyer and claimed my home was hers. I simply smiled and sent one text. 10 minutes later, his accounts hit zero. His luxury car locked him out and his credit cards were declined. He believed he was discarding me, but in reality I had just pressed the delete button on his entire comfortable life. My name is Scarlet Green, and for the last 7 years I believed that the scent of home was a specific blend of roasted Arabica, polished oak, and the lingering notes of my husband's cologne on the pillow beside me. The morning sun over Harbor View, California, usually painted the world in shades of gold and promise from the master suite of our cliffside estate. I could hear the rhythmic, muffled crashing of the Pacific Ocean against the rocks below, a sound that cost millions of dollars to own, but was priceless in its ability to soothe a restless mind. My life was designed to be enviable. I was the only daughter of a construction tycoon who had paved half the state, and I had taken that legacy, sharpened it, and built Everest Ridge Group into a modern investment empire. I dealt in skyscrapers, in sprawling commercial zones, and in land deals that reshaped skylines. But here, inside these walls, I took off the armor. I watched Liam Hartley standing before the full mirror, adjusting his silk tie with that practiced, easy grace that had charmed me nearly a decade ago. He was not born into this world of nine-figure trust funds and charity galas. He came from a quiet middle-class suburb, a man who had pulled himself up by his bootstraps, or so he liked to tell the story at dinner parties. He spun his past like a heroic epic of self-reliance, and I loved him for it. I loved him enough to hand him the keys to the kingdom. As a wedding gift, I had appointed him CEO of Everest Urban Living, a subsidiary I created specifically so he would never feel like he was walking in my shadow. I wanted him to be a king in his own right, not just the consort to the queen. "You look intense, darling," Liam said, catching my eye in the reflection. He turned, flashing that smile that could still make my breath hitch. It was a smile that promised safety. Just thinking about the quarterly projections, I lied. Slipping out of bed and wrapping my silk robe tighter around myself, I walked over to him, my bare feet sinking into the plush rug. I reached out to straighten his lapel, a ritual I cherished. This was what home felt like. It was not the high ceilings or the imported Italian marble floors. It was him. It was the way he smelled of cere and confidence. It was the way I could stop being the terrifying CEO, Scarlet Green, and just be a wife who supported her husband. Liam kissed my forehead, his hand lingering on my waist for a second too long, a gesture that felt possessive and affectionate all at once. Then he cleared his throat, his tone shifting almost imperceptibly into business mode. "Speaking of projections," he started, his voice casual, as if commenting on the weather, "I am going to need you to authorize a transfer this morning. Just a hospitality fund top-up." I looked up at him, still smiling. "Oh, big meeting." "Huge," he said, turning back to the mirror to check his hair. "The European investors for the Silver Point Ridge project. They are flying in earlier than expected, and I want to wine and dine them properly. We need to secure that capital before the quarter ends. I need approval for $380,000. $380,000. He said the number so smoothly it rolled off his tongue like he was asking for $20 for lunch. He did not even look at me when he said it, assuming with the absolute confidence of a spoiled child that I would simply nod. I had always nodded. I was the endless well, the financier of his dreams, the wife who signed the checks because I trusted his vision. But something cold and sharp pricked the back of my neck. My smile stayed fixed on my face, frozen in place by years of boardroom training, but my mind violently recoiled. My heart skipped a beat, then hammered against my ribs. Silver Point Ridge. I knew every single project under the Everest umbrella. I knew the land surveys, the zoning permits, and the architectural drafts. I reviewed the master files every Sunday night while Liam watched football. The Silver Point Ridge project was in its infancy. It was nothing more than raw land and a few concept sketches. We were months, perhaps even a year away from soliciting foreign investment. There were no European investors. There was no road so scheduled. There was no reason on earth to spend $380,000 on hospitality for a phantom delegation. "Why are you lying to me?" The thought screamed in my head loud enough that I feared he might hear it. "Scarlet, Liam turned to look at me, a flicker of impatience crossing his handsome face. "Did you hear me, babe? $380,000. I told finance to flag it for your approval by 9 this morning." "Of course," I said, and my voice sounded terrifyingly normal. "I will handle it as soon as I get to the office. European investors. That is exciting, Liam." He kissed my cheek again, satisfied. "You are the best. I do not know what I would do without you." He grabbed his briefcase and headed for the door, leaving a trail of his expensive scent in his wake. I stood there, frozen in the middle of the room, listening to his footsteps fade down the hallway. I heard the heavy front door close and then the roar of his engine as he pulled out of the driveway. Panic, cold, and nauseating began to rise in my throat. I walked to the window that overlooked the manicured lawn in the sweeping driveway. I watched his car disappear around the bend. Was I going crazy? Was I becoming one of those paranoid corporate types who saw shadows in every corner? Maybe I was wrong. Maybe he had hustled ahead of schedule. Liam was ambitious. Maybe he had found investors I did not know about. I tried to force myself to believe that. I tried to summon the blind faith I had carried for 7 years. But the crack had already appeared. Once the first crack shows, you cannot stop seeing the structural damage. My mind, usually a disciplined steel trap, began to replay the last 6 months with agonizing clarity. I remembered the credit card statements I had glanced at and dismissed dinners at restaurants 2 hours away from his office. I remembered the nights he came home late, claiming he was at site visits, yet his clothes bore the faint, cloying scent of a floral perfume that was definitely not mine. I remembered the way he would flip his phone face down on the coffee table the second I walked into the room, the screen going black on conversations I was never meant to see. I had buried those red flags under the foundation of our marriage. I had poured concrete over them because I wanted to be happy. I wanted to be the woman who had it all, the empire and the love story. But $380,000 for a lie was too big to bury. I looked around the bedroom. The sunlight hitting the furniture suddenly felt harsh, exposing dust motes dancing in the air. The luxury felt cold. The silence of the house, usually my sanctuary, now felt heavy like the air before a thunderstorm. I walked over to my vanity and sat down, staring at my own reflection. I did not see my wife anymore. I saw the daughter of a shark. I saw the woman who had negotiated hostile takeovers and navigated recession-proof deals. I picked up my phone. My thumb hovered over the banking app. I could call him. I could ask him who these investors were. I could demand to see the meeting agenda. But if I asked, he would spin another story. He was a storyteller. After all, he would charm me, gaslight me, make me feel small for doubting him. He would say I was controlling, that I did not trust his competence. No, I would not ask. I typed out a quick message to my assistant. Approve the transfer for Everest Urban Living, $380,000. Mark it as priority. I sent the money. I gave him exactly what he wanted. I fed the beast. But as I stood up and walked into my dressing room to choose my suit for the day, I needed armor today. I made a silent vow. I was done being the supportive wife who looked the other way. I fastened my watch, the cool metal chilling my wrist. Today, I would not look at our bank accounts as a spouse. I would look at them as a forensic accountant. I would audit my marriage with the same ruthless precision I used to audit a failing company. If Liam Hartley was stealing from me, if he was lying to me, I would find every single cent. I walked back to the window one last time before leaving. The morning mist still clung to the grass, shimmering and beautiful. The mansion stood proud on the cliff, a monument to wealth and stability. But as I pressed my hand against the cold glass, looking out at the life I had built, I realized it was all an illusion. It looked solid, but it was just a reflection on a fragile surface. And I had a terrible sinking feeling that by the time the sun went down tonight, I would see exactly what was rotting underneath the foundation. The Everest Ridge Group headquarters was a fortress of steel and glass that pierced the skyline of Harborview. It was a building designed to intimidate, to project power, and to assure investors that their money was protected by walls that could withstand earthquakes and economic crashes alike. As I stepped out of my car and walked through the revolving doors, I felt the familiar shift in my posture. The wife who had stood by the window in a silk robe terrified and vulnerable, was gone. In her place was the CEO. My spine straightened, my chin lifted, and my eyes scanned the lobby with a detached precision. "Good morning, Mrs. Bean." The security guard nodded, respectful and sharp. "Good morning, Thomas," I replied, my voice steady. I rode the private elevator to the 35th floor. The silence in the cabin was heavy, but it gave me time to lock away my heart. Emotions were liabilities in business, and right now my marriage was looking less like a partnership and more like a failing subsidiary. When the doors slid open, the hum of the office greeted me. It was the sound of productivity phones ringing, keyboards clacking, low voices discussing margins and zoning laws. No one here knew that my personal life had developed a hairline fracture an hour ago. To them, I was the unshakable Scarlet Green. I walked straight to my office, bypassing my assistant with a quick wave. "Get Harold Brooks," I said, not breaking my stride. "Tell him I need him in my office immediately, and tell him to bring his laptop." I did not sit behind my desk. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, looking down at the city I had helped build. When Harold knocked and entered, I turned. Harold had been the CFO since my father's days. He was a man of numbers, gay-haired, loyal to the bone, and possessed of a conscience that sometimes made him a terrible liar. "Scarlett," he said, clutching his laptop, "you asked for me. We were not scheduled to review the quarterlies until Friday." "Close the door, Harold," I said, "and lock it." Harold paused, his eyes widening slightly behind his wire-rimmed glasses. He did as he was told, the click of the lock sounding like a gunshot in the quiet room. "Sit down," I instructed, pointing to the leather chair opposite my desk. I finally sat down myself, folding my hands on the mahogany surface. "I need you to run a specific report for me right now." Harold opened his laptop, his fingers hovering over the keys. "Name it." "I want to see a cross-reference of every transfer from my personal holding accounts to any entity, account, or credit line associated with Liam in the last 12 months. The silence that followed was deafening. Harold did not type. He looked up at me, and for a fleeting second I saw pity in his eyes. It was a look that confirmed my worst fears. He knew, or at least he suspected. "Scarlett," he started, his voice soft. "Are you sure financial privacy within a marriage is usually—" "Do not quote privacy laws to me, Harold." I cut him off, my voice cold and hard like polished granite. "You handle my family trust. You handle my personal portfolio. And you handle the payroll for Everest Urban Living. If the money moved, you know where it went. Run the report." Harold sighed, a long, heavy sound of resignation. He typed for a few minutes, the silence stretching thin. Then he turned the laptop around to face me. I took the liberty of flagging irregularities over the last 2 quarters. Harold said quietly, "I was waiting for the right time to bring them to you." I looked at the screen. The numbers were not just data. They were a road map of betrayal. "Scroll down," I commanded. My eyes darted across the rows. October 14th, $5,200. The Ritz-Carlton, Laguna Beach, November 2nd, $18,500. Private aviation charter to Desert Falls, December 10th, $9,000. Van Clee and Arpels. "These dates," I whispered, pointing at the screen. October 14th. Liam said he was at the structural engineering conference in Seattle. The charge was made in Laguna Beach, Harold confirmed, his voice devoid of emotion, now purely professional. "And Scarlett, look at column C." I looked. Beside every large personal expenditure was a corresponding charge to the Everest Urban Living corporate account. "He is double-dipping," I realized, the taste of bile rising in my throat. "He is expensing the trip to the company as business development and using the funds I transferred to his personal account to pay for the actual luxury upgrades. He is stealing twice, but it was the recurring payment at the bottom of the sheet that made my blood run cold. Hartwell Living Group, LLC, $7,500 monthly." "What is Hartwell Living Group?" I asked. "I have never heard of that vendor. I looked into it this morning after you called me." Harold said, "It is a shell company registered in Delaware 3 days after you appointed Liam as CEO. The sole signatory is Liam Hartley. The funds go into that LLC and then they are immediately wired out to a property management firm. Which firm? Southridge Lofts, Harold said. I closed my eyes for a second. Southridge Lofts. It was a high-end residential building on the other side of town. Trendy, discreet, and expensive. He is renting an apartment, I said, opening my eyes. With my money, it appears so, Harold said. The dollop, 7,500 covers the monthly lease for a penthouse unit. I reached for my phone. My hand was steady, but inside I was screaming. I dialed a number I had not used in years. Michael, an old friend from college, was the general manager at Southridge. Michael, I said when he answered, it is Scarlet Green. I need a favor, a big one. Off the record, I gave him Liam's license plate number. I asked him to check the garage logs and the security feed for the penthouse elevator. I waited on hold for 10 minutes, staring at Harold, who had the decency to look at the floor. When Michael came back on the line, his voice was tight. Scarlet, he said, the vehicle is here. It is parked in spot 4B. It has been here 3 nights a week for the last 5 months. Is he alone? I asked. I am sending you a clip from the elevator security feed from last Tuesday. Michael said, I think you need to see it yourself. My phone buzzed. I'd opened the video file. The grainy footage showed the interior of an elevator. The doors opened and Liam walked in. He looked relaxed, happy, happier than I had seen him in months. And he was not alone. Clinging to his arm was a woman. She was younger, perhaps mid-20s. Brunette hair cascaded down her back in waves. She wore a dress that cost more than most people's cars, and she was looking at Liam with a hunger that had nothing to do with business. As the doors closed, Liam pulled her close and kissed her. It was not a quick peck. It was the kiss of a man who owned the world. I watched the video loop 3 times. I felt a sharp, stinging pain in my left hand. I looked down. I had clenched my fist so hard that my nails had broken the skin of my palm. A single drop of bright, red blood welled up, stark against my pale skin. The pain grounded me. It cleared the fog of shock. This was not a mistake. This was not a midlife crisis. This was a systematic extraction of resources. Liam was not just cheating on me physically. He was embezzling my affection and my assets to fund a shadow life. He was building a nest egg with a mistress, using the money I worked 18 hours a day to earn. I wiped the blood from my palm with a tissue and looked up at Harold. My face was a mask of calm. Harold, I said, my voice dropping an octave, losing all traces of warmth. I want you to download everything. Every bank statement, every flight log, every LLC registration document, and that video file. What are we going to do? Harold asked. Create a new folder on the secure server. I instructed. Encryption level 5. No one accesses it but you and me. What do I name the folder? Name it Personal, I said. I stood up and walked back to the window. The city below looked different now. It was no longer a kingdom to rule. It was a battlefield. Liam thought he was playing a game. He thought he was clever, hiding expenses in plain sight, thinking I was too in love or too busy to notice. He had made a fatal error. He forgot that before I was a wife, I was a green. Scarlet, Harold asked tentatively from the desk. Are you okay? I stared at the reflection of the woman in the glass. She looked dangerous. I am fine, Harold, I said. Actually, I am better than fine. I finally have clarity. I turned back to him, a small, cold smile playing on my lips. He is not a husband anymore, Harold. He is a non-performing asset with significant liability attached. And you know what we do with bad investments. We liquidate them, Harold whispered. Exactly, I said. We balance the books and we do not leave a single penny on the table. I told my assistant I was taking the afternoon off for a mental health day, a phrase that usually implies spa treatments or perhaps a quiet glass of wine by the ocean. In reality, I drove my black sedan to the Oceanside Promenade, the most exclusive shopping district in Harbor View, not to buy, but to think. The promenade was a sanctuary of marble walkways and high-end boutiques, a place where the air smelled of sea salt and money. But I did not go to the stores. Instead, I found myself wandering down into the cool, fluorescent-lit silence of the underground parking garage. It was a strange place to seek clarity, surrounded by concrete and the smell of rubber, but the silence here felt more honest than the polished lies waiting for me at home. I was walking toward the elevator bank when I saw it. It was parked in a reserved spot near the entrance, gleaming under the harsh industrial lights like a weapon, a graphite gray Aston Martin DB11. It was aggressive, beautiful, and utterly out of place among the sedans and SUVs. My heart gave a singular, painful thud against my ribs. I knew this car, not because I had seen it before, but because I had memorized its invoice number just 24 hours ago in Harold's office. The purchase date was last week. The down payment was $80,000 wired directly from the Hartwell Living Group, LLC. I stopped walking. I stood in the shadows of a concrete pillar, my hand tightening around the strap of my bag. I should have turned around. I should have walked away and let the lawyers handle the paperwork. But a morbid curiosity held me there. I wanted to see the driver. I wanted to see what $80,000 of my stolen money looked like in human form. The elevator door slid open with a soft chime. The woman who stepped out was a splash of vivid color against the gray concrete. She was young, perhaps 26 or 27. She wore a dress that was a shade too tight and a hemline a few inches too short for a Tuesday afternoon, hugging curves that were clearly maintained with expensive gym memberships. Her hair was a cascading wave of rich brunette, and her lips were painted a defiant glossy red. This was Vanessa Cole. I recognized her from the grainy elevator footage, but in person she was more formidable. She carried herself with a terrifying confidence, the kind that comes from believing you have already won the lottery. She walked toward the Aston Martin, swinging a keychain around her finger. I must have made a sound, or perhaps she just sensed me. She stopped mid-stride, her heels clicking sharply on the concrete. She turned, her eyes scanning the shadows until they locked onto mine. For a second, there was surprise. Then a slow, predatory smile spread across her face. She did not look ashamed. She did not look court. She looked delighted. "Mrs. Green," she said, her voice smooth, carrying an edge of mock difference. She walked toward me, closing the distance between us until I could smell her perfume. It was heavy, floral, and expensive. "I have heard so much about you and about your lovely home." The way she said home made my skin crawl. It was possessive. She spoke as if she were complimenting a dress she intended to borrow and never return. "You have me at a disadvantage," I said, my voice steady, though my pulse was hammering. "I do not believe we have met." "Oh, we have not met," Vanessa said, stopping just outside of personal space. She held up the key fob, pressing a button. Behind her, the Aston Martin chirped and unlocked, the side mirrors unfolding like wings. "But Liam talks about you all the time. He says you are a very dedicated woman." She let the word dedicated hang in the air, twisting it until it sounded like pathetic. "I see," I replied, keeping my face impassive. "And I'd assume that is the car my husband helped you select." Vanessa laughed, a tinkling, confident sound. She raised her wrist, flashing a diamond tennis bracelet that caught the fluorescent light. "He has excellent taste, does he not? He says I deserve the best. He says he is tired of living in a museum and wants to start living in the real world again." She took a step closer, her eyes dropping to my sensible business suit, then back up to my face. The mask of politeness vanished completely. "He told me about the renovation plans," she said, her voice lowering to a conspiratorial whisper. "For the mansion, he says that once the legal dust settles, we are going to tear down that gloomy east wing. He promised me the master suite would have a better view once we get rid of those old oak trees you love so much." I felt a cold shock run through me. The east wing, the oak trees. Those were details Liam knew I cherished. But it was what she said next that stopped my breath. "He showed me the Green Legacy Trust documents." "Scarlett," she said, using my first name with deliberate insolence. "I used to be a paralegal, you know. I know how to read fine print." Section 42, paragraph B, the residency clause regarding spousal occupation rights during the transition of assets. My blood turned to ice. The Green Legacy Trust was a fortress. The documents were kept in a biometric safe in our home office. Section 42 was a highly specific obscure clause regarding how the property could be used if the primary beneficiary was incapacitated or if the trust was being restructured. Only my lawyer, myself, and Liam knew that Klaus existed. Liam had opened the safe. He had taken the most confidential financial blueprints of my life and handed them to this woman so she could hunt for loopholes. She was not just a mistress. She was an accomplice to corporate espionage. She had audited my life before I had even audited his. He says, Vanessa continued, leaning in, her eyes glinting with malice, that sooner rather than later you are just going to be a temporary tenant in a house that will effectively be under his control and by extension mine. She waited for me to scream. She waited for me to slap her. She wanted the drama. She wanted the angry, scorned wife scene that she could report back to Liam to prove that I was unstable. You are quite. Vanessa smirked. Catgot your tongue. Or are you just realizing that being a boring wife clinging to daddy's money is not enough to keep a man like Liam? The insult was designed to draw blood. It was the oldest, cheapest shot in the book. But instead of anger, I felt a strange cold clarity wash over me. It was the same feeling I got before closing a hostile takeover. They had shown their hands. They thought they were holding 4 aces, but they were playing with cards I had marked years ago. She thought she was the future mistress of the manor. She did not realize she was standing on a trap door. I looked at her, really looked at her. I saw the hunger, the arrogance, and the profound stupidity of underestimating the person who actually signed the checks. I forced the corners of my mouth up into a small, polite smile. It was the smile I gave to competitors right before I bought their companies for pennies on the dollar. Congratulations on the new car, Vanessa, I said softly. She blinked, confused by my tone. It is a beautiful machine, I continued, my voice conversational. Make sure you drive it carefully and keep it safe. I paused, letting my eyes drift over the Aston Martin, then back to her confused face. Although, I added, my tone dropping to a whisper, things that are owned by other people are usually very hard to keep for long. I did not wait for her response. I turned on my heel and began to walk toward the elevator. Hey, Vanessa shouted after me, her composure cracking. She did not like that I had not engaged. She did not like that I had not cried. You can walk away, Scarlet, but you cannot stop what is coming. That house is going to be mine. I am going to throw out every piece of furniture you own. I am going to erase you from that place. Her voice echoed off the concrete walls, shrill and desperate. I am going to erase you. I pressed the call button for the elevator. As the metal door slid open, I did not look back. I stepped inside and pressed the button for the lobby. As the doors closed, cutting off the sight of Vanessa Cole and the stolen Aston Martin, I let out a slow breath. She wanted to erase me. I looked at my reflection in the polished metal of the elevator doors. My expression was calm, terrifyingly so. No, Vanessa, I whispered to the empty car. You got the order of operations wrong. She thought she was fighting a war for her husband. She did not realize she had just declared war on a bank. And banks do not get mad. Banks foreclose. I took my phone out of my pocket. I had a meeting to plan. If Liam and Vanessa wanted to play with legal documents, I would introduce them to a few clauses they had evidently missed. By the time I reached the ground floor, the plan was no longer a vague idea. It was a demolition order, and I was ready to pull the lever. The meeting was not held at a law firm. Law firms have glass walls and receptionists who gossip. And right now, I needed the kind of silence that only money could buy. I had booked a private boardroom at the Kensington, a 5-star hotel in the Westport district, tucked away on a floor accessible only by a key card that cost more than most people's monthly mortgage. The room smelled of old leather and expensive tea. It was a war room, a place where treaties were signed or broken. And today I was planning an invasion. Sitting across from me was Nora Blake. We had met in our freshman year at Stanford, bonding over cheap wine and a shared hatred for a microeconomics professor. Now, 20 years later, Nora was one of the most feared divorce and commercial litigation attorneys in California. She was a shark in Louboutins, a woman who could smile at you while systematically dismantling your entire life. I did not say a word as I slid my laptop across the mahogany table. The folder ordered personal was already open. Beside the laptop, I placed a printed glossy photograph of the Aston Martin in the garage and a zoomed-in shot of Vanessa Cole's smiling face. Nora adjusted her glasses, her sharp eyes scanning the screen. She scrolled, she clicked, she paused, then she scrolled some more. The silence in the room stretched for 10 minutes, broken only by the aggressive tapping of her perfectly manicured fingernail against the trackpad. Finally, she stopped. She looked up at me, took a deep breath, and let it out in a hiss. "That parasite," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "That absolute parasite in a bespoke suit. It is worse than I thought, is it not?" I asked, my voice steady, though my hands were trembling slightly in my lap. "Scarlett, this is not just bad," Nora said, turning the laptop back around to face me. "This is pathological. He is not just cheating on you. He is treating your bank account like an endless venture capital fund for his midlife crisis. The Aston Martin, the apartment at Southridge. He is expensing his mistress as a business cost." She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a thick leather binder. It was a copy of my prenuptial agreement, a document we had drafted 7 years ago. At the time, Liam had signed it willingly, playing the role of the humble man who wanted me for my heart, not my wallet. "Let us review the fortress," Nora said, flipping the pages with a snap. "The good news is we were paranoid back then, and it is paying off now. The prenup is ironclad regarding premarital assets, the Everest Ridge Group, your personal portfolio, the family inheritance. It is all protected. Technically, Liam has no equity. He is an employee, a very highly paid employee, but an employee nonetheless." "But," I asked. I knew there was a but. Nora sighed, taking a sip of the cold tea. "California is a community property state. He is going to argue that his sweat equity contributed to the growth of the subsidiary. He is going to demand spousal support. He will claim he has become accustomed to a certain lifestyle, a lifestyle you funded, and he will play the victim. He will go to court and say, you were the controlling eyes who emasculated him, and he was forced to seek solace elsewhere. Let him try." I said, "I have the adultery proof." Adultery does not always void financial support obligations in California. Scarlett, Nora warned, it helps, but it is not a magic bullet. He could still drag this out for 2 years. He could demand millions just to go away. I reached into my bag and pulled out a second folder. This was the new data Harold had found only 3 hours ago. "Look at the third page," I said. Nora opened the folder. Her eyes narrowed as she read the document. It was a power of attorney authorization for a line of credit supposedly signed by me 3 months ago. "Is this your signature?" Nora asked, pointing to the looping script at the bottom. "It looks like mine," I said, "but on that date I was in Tokyo for the Asian Pacific Summit. I have the passport stamps to prove it. I never signed that." Nora's face changed. The frustrated friend vanished and the predatory lawyer appeared. She leaned forward, her eyes gleaming. "Forbury," she whispered. "Now we are leaving civil court and knocking on the door of criminal liability." She grabbed a legal pad and uncapped her pen. "Okay, the game just changed," Nora said, drawing a sharp line down the center of the page. "We are not just looking at a divorce anymore. We are building a multilayered offensive strategy. Tier 1 is the divorce filing based on irreconcilable differences backed by the evidence of financial infidelity. That is standard." She drew a second box. "Tier 2 is breach of fiduciary duty," she continued, her voice gaining speed. "As the CEO of a subsidiary, Liam has a legal obligation to act in the best interest of the company. Using corporate funds to buy luxury cars for a mistress, that is misappropriation of funds. That is cause for immediate termination with cause. That means no severance package, no golden parachute." "And the forgery?" I asked. "Tier 3, Nora said, circling the third box heavily. "4. If we can prove he signed your name to access credit, we can dangle a prison sentence over his head. We might not need to use it, but it is the nuclear option. It is the leverage we use to make him sign whatever settlement we want." She looked at me, her expression softening slightly. "But there is one thing that worries me." "Scarlett, the house." I nodded. "The Harbour View mansion, the jewel of the coast. He thinks it is marital property." Nora said, "He has been telling people it is our home. If a judge decides the house is community property because you use joint funds to maintain it, he could force a sale. He could demand 50% of the current market value. That is $20 million he could walk away with. I leaned back in my chair and allowed myself a small dry smile. He can think whatever he wants, I said softly. Nora looked at me confused. Scarlett, if you used a joint account to pay the property taxes even once. I never did, I interrupted. Nora, there is something I never told Liam. I never told anyone except my father before he died. I leaned forward, lowering my voice. The deed to the Harborview mansion was never transferred to me personally. It was never transferred to us as a couple. The house is owned entirely by the Green Legacy Trust. Nora's eyebrows shot up. And here's the kicker, I continued. The trust documents have a specific residency clause. Liam is listed not as an owner and not even as a tenant. He is listed as a guest of the beneficiary. His right to reside on the property is revocable at my sole discretion, effective immediately upon the filing of any dissolution of marriage petition. Nora stared at me for a moment, and then a slow, delighted grin spread across her face. She let out a laugh, a loud, genuine bark of laughter that startled the silence of the room. "You brilliant woman," she said, shaking her head. "You kept him as a guest in his own house for 7 years, and he had no idea. He never asked to see the deed." I shrugged. He was too busy enjoying the view. "Okay," Nora said, tapping her pen against the pad rapidly. "This changes the timeline. If we file for divorce today, he is out on the street tonight. We can lock him out." "No," I said. Nora stopped tapping. "No, Scarlett. He is stealing from you. Every day he stays, he drains more money. If I kick him out today," I said, looking out the window at the gray skyline, "he will panic. He will lawyer up immediately. He will hide the rest of the money he has squirreled away. He will play the victim to the press before I can control the narrative." I turned back to her. "I do not want a messy fight where he walks away with a settlement just to shut him up. I want him to have nothing. Nora, I want him to believe he's winning. I want him to get arrogant." "You want to bait him," Nora realized. "I want him to feel so safe that he makes a mistake." I said, "I want him to sign more papers. I want him to incriminate himself so deeply that when I finally pull the rug out, there is no floor beneath him, just a black hole." Nora looked at the photo of Vanessa Cole again. "And her? She thinks she is the future lady of the manor." I said, "Let her think that. Let her pick out curtains. Let her plan the renovation. The higher they climb, the harder the fall." Nora nodded slowly, respect evident in her eyes. "So we wait. We restructure the trust and the companies in the background. We build the wall brick by brick. We let him think he is the king until the moment you decapitate the monarchy." "Exactly." And I said, "How long?" Nora asked. "The coastal preservation gala is in 2 weeks. I said he wants to play the big philanthropist. He wants to show off. That is when I will do it." Nora closed the binder. 2 weeks. I will have the papers drawn up. I will have the forensic accountants trace every dime of that Hartwell Living Group, LLC. By the time of the gala, we will know what he bought for breakfast in 2018. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Her grip was firm, grounding. "Scarlett," she said softly, "we are going to destroy him. But are you sure you can handle 2 more weeks of playing the loving wife? Can you sleep next to him knowing what you know?" I thought about the coldness in my chest. I thought about the smell of his cologne that used to mean home and now just smelled like deceit. "I can do it," I said. "I will cook his dinner. I will smile at his jokes. I will sign his birthday cards." I stood up, smoothing the front of my skirt. "I am not doing it for love, nor. I am doing it for the look on his face when he realizes that the only thing he actually owns in that marriage is the suit on his back. And even that," Nora smirked, "was probably paid for with the corporate card." "Exactly," I said. "I want him to leave with exactly what he brought to the table. 0. We shook hands. It was not the handshake of friends saying goodbye. It was the handshake of generals agreeing on a battle plan. As I left the hotel room and walked back out into the cool afternoon air, I did not feel like a victim. I felt like a CEO who had just approved a very necessary, very aggressive restructuring plan. The demolition was scheduled. Now I just had to wait for the right moment to detonate. The room I chose for the meeting was colloquially known within Everest Ridge as the Tank. It was situated on the 42nd floor, nestled in the building's core. It had no windows, no cellular service, and walls lined with acoustic dampening panels designed to prevent laser microphones from picking up vibrations. It was where we planned hostile takeovers. Today, I was planning the hostile takeover of my own life. I sat at the head of the glass table. To my left was Harold Brooks, my CFO, looking paler than usual. To my right was Darius Shore, the head of corporate security. Darius was a former intelligence officer, a man who spoke little and missed nothing. He did not look nervous. He looked ready to hunt. "This conversation never leaves this room," I began, my voice flat and echoing slightly in the soundproofed space. "If it does, I will not sue you. I will destroy your careers. Are we clear?" Both men nodded. They knew I was not making idle threats. "Good," I said. "We are restructuring the Green Estate. Harold, I want a complete separation of assets, effective immediately, but it has to be done silently. If Liam gets a notification on his phone that a joint account has been closed, he will panic and drain whatever cash he can access." I slid a piece of paper across the table to Harold. It was a list of account numbers. "These are the joint operating accounts," I said. "I want you to drain them down to the minimum required balance to keep them active. Move the bulk of the liquid capital, about $4 million, into the Green Legacy Trust Preservation Fund. Do it in tranches of $200,000 so it does not trigger an immediate freeze by the bank's fraud algorithm." Harold typed rapidly on his secure laptop. "I can route them through the holding company first to make it look like internal capital allocation for the new quarter. It will look like standard business hygiene. Do it." I said. "Next, power of attorney. Liam currently holds a limited power of attorney for the charitable foundation and the household operational accounts. Revoke them. I will need to file that with the state." Harold noted. "It becomes public record. File it under a seal of confidentiality pending litigation," I instructed. "Or better yet, just change the internal authorization protocols at the bank. Tell them that effective immediately, any transaction over $500 requires verbal confirmation from me and a two-step biometric verification. If he tries to swipe a card for a new watch, I want it to decline unless I approve it." "I can set up a shadow block," Harold suggested, his fingers flying across the keys. "The system will accept the request, but flag it as pending approval indefinitely. He will think it is a bank error, not a revocation." "Perfect," I said. "Now, the kill switch." I looked at both of them. This was the most critical part of the plan. "I need a single digital trigger," I explained. "I do not want to be on the phone with the bank for 3 hours when I decide to drop the hammer. I want a code, one text message from my encrypted line to a dedicated server. When I send that code, I want everything connected to Liam Hartley to go dark." Harold stopped typing and looked up, his eyes wide behind his glasses. Everything," I confirmed. "His corporate credit cards, his access to the Everest servers, his building key card, his email, his ability to authorize payments for the leased cars. I want his digital existence extinguished in 60 seconds." Harold swallowed hard. "I can write a script for that. It will link the HR termination protocols with the banking freezes. One command executes all subroutines." "Make it happen," I said, "and draft the termination letter." I handed over a second file. This one contained the spreadsheets of the embezzlement. "Liam Hartley, CEO of Everest Urban Living." I recited the words, tasting like ash in my mouth. "Terminated for cause: gross misconduct, misappropriation of corporate funds, breach of fiduciary duty." Have the legal team draft it, but keep it off the main server. Print one copy. I will sign it when the time comes." I turned to Darius. He had been sitting silently, his arms crossed, watching me with an intensity that was almost unsettling. "Darius," I said, "the house. The perimeter is secure," Darius rumbled, his voice deep. "Not the perimeter," I corrected. "The inside. Liam thinks he is clever. He thinks he knows where the cameras are. I need you to go in while we are out at the charity gala next week, or find a window when the house is empty. I want the feeds rerouted." "Rerouted where?" Darius asked. "To a private server that only I can access." I said the backups go to a cloud account that Liam has the password to. He deletes things. I want to stop that, and I need eyes and ears in the blind spots. I pulled up the floor plan of the mansion on the screen embedded in the table. Here I pointed to the garage, and here I pointed to the family office, and here I pointed to the main living room near the fireplace. I want audio high fidelity. If he whispers a plan to Vanessa in the corner of the garage, I want to hear them breathing. Darius nodded slowly. I can have a team in there tomorrow during the housekeeper's shift. We will disguise it as a routine security firmware upgrade. I will install omnidirectional mics in the smoke detectors. He will never look there. Good, I said. The meeting was winding down, the air in the room heavy with the weight of the conspiracy we were weaving. Harold closed his laptop, but he did not stand up. He looked down at his hands, hesitating. "Scarlett," he said softly. "What is it, Harold?" I asked, already mentally moving on to the next item on my checklist. "There is something I need to tell you," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "When you showed me the discrepancies yesterday, I felt sick, not just because of the theft, but because I tried to tell you." I froze. "What do you mean?" "6 months ago," Harold said, looking up at me with pained eyes, "I saw a transfer of $12,000 to a jewelry store. It looked wrong. I drafted a priority email to you. Subject line urgent financial irregularity. Review required immediately. I sent it. Scarlett. I swear I sent it." I frowned. "I never got that email, Harold. I checked my inbox every hour." "I know," Harold said. "I checked the server logs this morning while I was digging for the LLC data. The email was received by your server at 10:14 in the morning. At 10:15, it was accessed from an IP address inside the mansion. It was permanently deleted from your inbox and your trash folder." My breath caught in my throat. "Liam," I whispered, "he has your password." "Does he not?" Harold asked gently. "He helped set up my iPad." I realized a wave of nausea washing over me. He said he wanted to sync our calendars so we could plan vacations better. He had not just been stealing my money. He had been intercepting my warnings. He had been standing guard over my ignorance, actively filtering out the people who tried to save me. For a moment, the cold anger cracked, and beneath it, I felt a surge of profound sadness. I looked at Harold, this man who had worked for my father, who had watched me grow up. I had thought he was incompetent or complicit. I had judged him. "Thank you, Harold," I said, my voice thick with emotion. I thought everyone had just let it happen." "We would never," Harold said fiercely. "You are the green legacy, Scarlett. He is just a visitor." I took a deep breath, pushing the tears back. Crying would not help. Crying would not get my money back. "Darius," I said, regaining my composure, "change my email passwords. Change my phone access codes. Do it now. And Harold, from this moment on, no digital copies of the plan. Everything we discussed today gets printed." "To Cadiz?" Harold asked. I confirmed. "One goes into Nora's safe at her firm. The other." I paused. I thought about the hidden safe in the mansion, the one behind the false panel in the attic library that my father had installed for his architectural blueprints. "The other goes into the master's safe on the 3rd floor." I said, "I will take it home myself tonight. Change the code to the date my father founded the company. Liam will never guess that." We finished the session in silence. As Harold and Darius packed up their equipment, I remained in the chair for a moment, staring at the screen on the table. It displayed a map of my assets, the properties, the accounts, the investments. It looked different to me now. It was no longer a portfolio of wealth. It was a terrain map of a war zone. I traced the line connecting the main operating account to the subsidiary account Liam controlled. It was a supply line. He was the enemy army camped on my territory, eating my rations, using my fuel. I picked up the stylus and drew a red X through the line. In 10 days, I would cut the supply. I would surround the enemy, and I would starve him out until he surrendered unconditionally. "Let's go," I said to the empty room. "I have a husband to lie to." For the next 72 hours, I performed the role of my life. I did not win an Oscar, but if there were an Academy Award for woman pretending she does not know her husband is embezzling her fortune, I would have swept the category. I went home early. I stopped wearing my sharp charcoal executive suits and changed into soft cashmere sweaters, the kind that made me look touchable, domestic, and harmless. I dismissed the cook for the evenings and made risotto myself, stirring the arborio rice for 45 minutes just the way Liam liked it, filling the kitchen with the scent of truffle oil and parmesan. When he came home, I did not ask about the unexplained mileage on the car or the charges at the jewelry store. Instead, I poured him a glass of an expensive Cabernet and asked him about his day. The Silver Point deal is heating up, he told me over dinner, cutting into his steak with gusto. The European investors are tough, but I think I have them charmed. They are talking about doubling their initial commitment. That is incredible, honey, I said, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. My skin did not crawl, which was a testament to my willpower. You have such a gift for negotiation. My father always said you had the instinct for it. He beamed. It was pathetic how easily he absorbed the flattery. He was a man starving for validation, and I was feeding him a feast before the slaughter. Actually, he said, wiping his mouth with a linen napkin, speaking of your father and instincts, I have been thinking about us, about the future. He stood up and walked to his briefcase, which was sitting on the kitchen island. He pulled out a thick navy blue folder. My heart rate slowed down to a calculated thud. Here it was. I had my lawyers look over our estate planning, Liam said, placing the folder in front of me. Just a review. They pointed out that with the market being so volatile, you are incredibly exposed. Scarlet. If something happened to me, God forbid, or if there was some kind of legal attack on the company, your assets are too centralized. Exposed? I asked, widening my eyes innocently. It is technical, he said, waving his hand dismissively. But basically, to protect you, we should balance the ledger. This is an amendment to the estate plan. It essentially transfers title of the house into a joint tenny and moves a 40% stake of Evercrest Urban Living directly into my name. That way, if anyone sues you, they cannot touch those assets because they belong to us, not just you. I looked at the document. It was titled The Green-Hartley Asset Protection Strategy. It was a trap so obvious a first-year law student would have laughed at it. Joint tenancy meant he would own half the house outright. Moving the shares meant he would no longer be an employee I could fire. He would be a major shareholder I would have to buy out. He was trying to steal $20 million and calling it a shield. Oh, Liam, I said, touching the paper as if it were a precious gift. You did this for me. I just want you to be safe, he said, handing me a pen. You can just sign the back page. I can file it tomorrow. I took the pen. I hovered it over the signature line. I saw his eyes lock onto the tip of the pen, his pupil dilating with greed. Then I capped the pen. I am so touched, I said, smiling warmly. But you know how anal the board is. If I move 40% of the subsidiary's shares without the corporate legal team stamping it, they will have a compliance fit. Let me take it to the office tomorrow. I will have to legally put their rubber stamp on it, and I will sign it over lunch. Liam's smile faltered. A flash of irritation crossed his face quick, sharp and ugly. Babe, he said, his voice dropping a register. It is a private family document. Corporate legal does not need to see it. Why do you always have to involve them? Do you not trust me? I trust you with my life, I said, standing up and kissing his cheek. But I do not trust the SEC. Let me handle the red tape. I promise I will sign it by tomorrow night. He hesitated, jaw clenched, but he had no choice. To push harder would break the character of the protective husband. Fine, he said, forcing a smile that did not reach his eyes. Tomorrow night. The next morning, the document was on Nora's desk before my coffee was even warm. It is a hostile takeover disguised as a love letter, Nora said, flipping through the pages. Clause 7. He is not just asking for shares. He is asking for voting rights. He wants to be able to outvote you on the board of the subsidiary. Can we fix it? I asked. Better. Nora grinned. We can clone it. By 4:00 that afternoon, Nora's paralegals had created a masterpiece. They drafted a document that looked identical to Liam's. Same blue folder, same font, same title page, but inside the legal E's was gibberish. It granted him spiritual stewardship of the garden and honorary advisory status on the board positions that carried zero legal weight and zero financial value. That night, I came home with the twin folder. I put on a silk slip dress and lit candles in the living room. Did Levo approve it? Liam asked the moment he walked through the door. He did not even say hello. They did. I lied smoothly. They made a few tiny formatting tweaks for compliance, but the substance is exactly what you wanted. I opened the folder to the signature page. I uncapped the pen. To us, I said softly. To us, Liam whispered. I signed my name with a flourished scarlet green. He watched the ink dry, as if he were watching a winning lottery ticket being printed. He picked up the folder, checked the signature, and then exhaled a breath he must have been holding for weeks. I will file this first thing in the morning, he said, clutching the folder to his chest. You are so good to me, I said, taking a sip of wine to hide the smirk threatening to break through. 30 minutes later, while I was in the shower, Darius sent a notification to my secure phone. It was an audio file from the bug in the garage. I pressed play, the sound of a car door closing, then Liam's voice echoing in the concrete space. He was on the phone. She signed it. Message is done. A pause, then a laugh, a cold, triumphant sound. Yeah, I checked it. It is her signature. Half the house is legally mine as of tomorrow morning, and the shared baby. We are looking at 8 figures minimum. Another pause. No, I am not going to leave her yet. Not immediately. I need the ink to dry. Give it 2 weeks. Then I will start the fight. I will tell her I am unhappy, that she is suffocating me. I will make her offer to buy me out just to get me to leave. We are going to take her for everything. I stood under the hot water, letting it run over my face, listening to my husband plan my destruction. He sounded so proud of himself. He thought he was playing chess, but he had just captured a pawn thinking it was the queen. But the game was not over. We needed more than just greed. We needed malice. We needed to prove he was unfit, not just as a husband, but as a human being. 2 days later, the trap for Vanessa was set. We hired a private investigator named Mr. Lance. He was an older man with silver hair and a tailored suit that screamed old money. We positioned him at the Velvet Lounge, a high-end bar where Vanessa liked to hold court, on Thursday nights. Vance's cover story was simple. He was a real estate speculator looking for distressed luxury properties. He needed to buy fast in cash, and he did not care about the optics. Darius had hacked the bar's reservation system to ensure Vance was seated at the table right next to Vanessa. I listened to the encounter via a live feed in Nora's office. Vance ordered a 50-year-old Scotch. Vanessa noticed. They struck up a conversation. Within 20 minutes, Vance dropped the bait. I am looking for a property on the cliffs, Vance said, his voice loud enough to be overheard but low enough to sound discreet. I heard the Green estate might be coming into some turbulence. I would pay $5 million over market value if I could close in 10 days, but I heard the owner is difficult. Vanessa took the bait like a starving shark. Difficult is one word for it, Vanessa said, swiping her stool toward him. I am actually very close to the co-owner. Is that so? Vance asked the wife. Vanessa lowered her voice, leaning in. She is not well mentally. I mean, that complicates a sale, Vance said, looking concerned. If she is unstable, she cannot sign a deed unless she is under a conservatorship. Vanessa finished the sentence for him. My partner is working on that. She has been having episodes, paranoid, forgetful, violent outbursts. Violent. Vance raised an eyebrow. That is tragic. We are documenting it, Vanessa said, and I could hear the smirk in her voice. We are going to provoke. I mean, we are going to wait for a major breakdown. Once the police are involved and she is committed for evaluation, he gets power of attorney, then he can sell the house fast. Smart, Vance said. If that happens, here's my card. Call me first. Oh, I will, Vanessa said. Ideally, we want her out of the picture completely. A nice long stay in a facility would be best for everyone, especially her bank account. In Nora's office, I took off the headphones. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a rage so pure it felt like white heat. They were not just going to divorce me. They were planning to gaslight me. They were going to stage a breakdown, have me committed, and strip me of my rights so they could liquidate my father's legacy. We have it, Nora said, her face pale. Conspiracy to commit fraud, intent to inflict emotional distress. This is not just leverage, Scarlett. This is a prison sentence. I drove home that night in silence. The city lights blurred past me. When I climbed into bed, Liam was already there. He was reading a book, the picture of domestic tranquility. He put the book down and wrapped his arm around my waist, pulling me close. You feel tense, he whispered, kissing the back of my neck. Work stress. Just a long day, I said. Do not worry, he murmured, his breath warm against my ear. I am here. I am going to take care of everything. I want to protect you, Scarlett, for the rest of your life. I lay there in the dark, his arm draped over me like a heavy chain in my left ear. I wore a tiny wireless earbud concealed by my hair. I pressed play on the recording from the bar earlier that night while Liam whispered, I want to protect you. I listened to Vanessa's voice in my ear, crisp and clear. We are going to provoke a breakdown. A nice long stay in a facility would be best for everyone. And then I heard Liam's recorded laughter from the garage joining in the chorus of my nightmare. I closed my eyes. I know you will, Liam, I whispered back to him. I know exactly how you plan to protect me. He tightened his hold, thinking it was affection. I lay still, a statue of ice, counting down the hours. The Garler was in 4 days, and in 4 days, the monster sleeping beside me would wake up in a world where he did not exist. The trap was baited with greed, and Liam Hartley was starving. 2 days before the Garler, Liam cornered me in the sunroom. The morning light was filtering through the glass, illuminating the dusk motes dancing in the air. But Liam was too focused to notice the beauty of the morning. He had that manic gleam in his eyes, the one he always got when he thought he was about to close a deal that would make him look like a titan of industry. Scarlett, I need you to look at this, he said, sliding a glossy brochure across the coffee table. Sierra Lake. It is an exclusive closed-loop resort development. The buy-in window is closing in 48 hours. I picked up the brochure. It was slick, professional, and completely hollow. I had Harold vet the project quietly the night before. Sierra Lake was real, but the exclusive buy-in Liam was pitching was a fabrication. He was not buying equity in a resort. He was trying to funnel cash into a black hole. It looks ambitious, I said, keeping my voice neutral, but we usually do not move this fast on recreational properties. Liam, the risk assessment alone takes weeks. That is the old way of thinking. Liam pressed, leaning forward, invading my space with his urgency. The market is moving too fast for weeks of due diligence. The lead developer wants to deal with me directly because of my work on the urban project. But here is the catch. He wants the bridge capital in place by Friday. $2.5 million. He paused, letting the number hang in the air. 2.5 million, I repeated slowly. If we put this in, we triple our money in 18 months, Liam said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Think about it, Scarlett. This helps Everest Ridge stop relying so much on your father's old portfolio. This would be our win, a legacy we built together. He knew exactly which buttons to press. He was weaponizing my desire for a partnership, for a marriage of equals. And where does the money go? I asked. Directly to the developer's escrow. No, Liam said quickly. Too quickly. The developer is eccentric. He wants to simplify the cap table. He wants me to aggregate the investment through a single-purpose vehicle. I set up an LLC called Sierra Crest Ventures. You wire the money there. I bundle it with the other investors, and we send it over as one package. It is cleaner. It was not cleaner. It was theft. He wanted me to wire $2.5 million to a bank account he controlled solely so he could wash the money and run. I looked at him, finding deep hesitation. I bit my lip. I looked away, staring out at the ocean. I let the silence stretch until I saw a bead of sweat form on his temple. I needed him to sweat. I needed him to work for it. I do not know, Liam, I murmured. It is a lot of liquidity to move on such short notice. The board will ask questions. Screw the board, Liam snapped, then immediately softened his tone. Bade, please trust me. I need this. We need this. Do not let the corporate red tape strangle our future. I looked back at him, letting my eyes fill with a manufactured softness. "Okay," I whispered. "If you believe in it that much, 2 million." He exhaled, his entire body sagging with relief. "You will not regret this, Scarlett. I promise." I did not regret it because the moment he left the room to call the lawyers, I texted Harold. Operation Mira is a go. Harold had already set up the ghost account. It was a masterpiece of banking sleight of hand. He had created a sub-account within the Green Legacy Trust named Sierra Crest Venture Holdings. It sounded nearly identical to Liam's LLC. When I executed the wire transfer later, the confirmation screen would show Sierra Crest and the correct amount, satisfying Liam's visual check, but the routing number would send the money right back into a locked vault that I controlled. He would see the money leave. He would think he had it, but he would be holding a bucket with a hole in the bottom. But greed is a fire that consumes everything, and Vanessa Cole was pouring gasoline on it. Later that afternoon, while I was reviewing the Garler seating chart, a notification popped up on my secure tablet. It was an audio intercept from Liam's car. I put in my earpiece. 2.5 is cute. Liam. Vanessa's voice sneered through the connection. But it is not enough. Not if we want to disappear properly. It is all I could get her to agree to without triggering a board review. Liam sounded defensive. 2.5 million is plenty to start over instant. Trump. It is plenty for a year, Vanessa countered. But what about the legal fees? What about the lifestyle? If she comes after us, we need a war chest. Make it 5. Tell her the buying minimum was raised. Tell her whatever you have to tell her, but get $5 million into that account before Friday. 5 million. Liam sounded terrified. She is going to bark. She is weak. Liam, Vanessa said, her voice dripping with venom. She is desperate to keep you happy because she knows she is boring and aging out. Play the victim. Tell her you feel like she does not respect your business acumen. Guilt her into it. Just get the money. I took the earpiece out. My hand was trembling, but I forced it to stop. She is weak. I walked into the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and waited. 10 minutes later, Liam walked in. He looked pale, rehearsing his lines. "Scarlett," he started, rubbing the back of his neck. "I have bad news. I just got off the phone with the developer." "What is it?" I asked, sipping my water. "The $2.5 million tier is sold out." He lied. The institutional investors swept it up. The only tranche left is the preferred equity tier, $5 million. He looked at me with puppy dog eyes mixed with a hint of wounded pride. "I know it is double," he said, "but it comes with a board seat on the resort committee. And honestly, Scarlett, if we cannot do this, I am going to look like an amateur to these guys after everything I have done for Everest. I feel like I'm still begging for an allowance." There it was, the guilt trip Vanessa had scripted. I put my glass down. I walked over to him and placed my hands on his shoulders. I looked deep into his lying eyes. $5 million, I said softly. "Please," he whispered. "It is the last thing I will ever ask you for." That part at least was true. "Okay," I said. "I will authorize the transfer of $5 million to the Sierra Crest account tomorrow morning. But Liam, this has to be a home run." "It will be," he said, kissing me with a fervor that made me want to scrub my skin with bleach. "You are the best wife in the world." The next morning, I sat with him in the home office. I opened the banking portal. I entered the amount, $5 million. I entered the routing number for Harold's track account. "Ready?" I asked. "Do it," Liam said, his eyes glued to the screen. I clicked transfer. The screen flashed green. Transaction successful. $5,000, 1,000 SARS, transferred to Sierra Crest Venture Holdings. Liam let out a shout of triumph. He hugged me, spinning me around. He thought he had just stolen $5 million. He thought he was rich. He did not notice the extra word holdings on the confirmation receipt. He was too blinded by the zeros. But the theft was only the first part of their plan. The second part was far more sinister. That evening, I received a text from Mr. Vance, the private investigator. "The subject is moving. They are meeting at the house garage." Now I was upstairs in the master bedroom. I quickly locked the door and opened the secure app on my iPad. I switched the feed to the garage camera and audio. On the screen, In crisp high definition stood Liam and Vanessa. They were standing between my sedan and his new Aston Martin. Vanessa was holding a clipboard. "Okay, let us run it again." Vanessa said, "The police will ask for specifics. You cannot just say she is crazy." "I know," Liam said, pacing. "Okay, last Tuesday, we were arguing about the budget. Once you are the conservator, you can grant me access." Vanessa said, "I will move in the next day. We will change the locks. By the time she gets out, she will be medicated, discredited, and homeless." They both threw their heads back and laughed. It was a sound that echoed off the concrete walls of the garage, a sound of pure, unfiltered malice. I watched the screen, my face stone cold. I pressed the save button. The file downloaded to the cloud server, then backed up to Nora's encrypted drive. File name conspiracy to commit fraud and perjury evidence 01. I was about to close the app when I saw Liam pull out his phone. "Oh, I almost forgot," he said to Vanessa. "I sent the checklist to my lawyer just so we are ready when the divorce filing hits." "Did you include the art?" Vanessa asked. "Everything," Liam said. "Here, look." He showed her his phone screen. I could not see it clearly on the camera, but I did not need to because at that exact moment, Nora texted me a screenshot. She had subpoenaed Liam's lawyer's email server an hour ago as part of the pre-litigation discovery. Anticipating a move, she had caught an outgoing email from Liam. The subject line was asset division requirements. Attached was a list. I zoomed in on the screenshot. Item 1, 50% equity in Evercrest Urban Living. Item 2, $10 million lump sum spousal support. Item 3, the money hanging in the east hallway. Item 4, Harborview Mansion, primary residence rights. Note: Vanessa needs this property for her brand image. Vanessa needs this. He was not taking the house because he loved it. He was taking it because his mistress needed a backdrop for her Instagram. I stared at the words until they blurred. The audacity was so vast it was almost impressive. They wanted to lock me in a psych ward, drug me, steal my company, and give my mother's house to a failed paralegal so she could take selfies. I put the iPad down. I walked over to the wall calendar hanging by the door. Next Saturday was circled in red ink the Coastal Preservation Gala. It was supposed to be the social event of the season. Liam had invited everyone, the bankers, the investors, the city council. He wanted to parade his success. He wanted to show off the $5 million he thought he had just secured. I picked up a thick black marker. I drew a heavy X through the date, and under it I wrote 2 words: lights out. They wanted to show I would give them a show. They wanted to talk about who owned the house. We would talk about it. I looked at the X. It was not just a date. It was detonation time. I walked to the window and looked down at the garage roof. Liam and Vanessa were still in there laughing, planning my demise. "Laugh while you can," I whispered to the glass, because at midnight on Saturday the laughter was going to stop, and the only thing they would be left with was the echo of their own stupidity. The Harborview Mansion had ceased to be a home hours ago. By 8:00 that evening it had transformed into a stage set for a tragedy disguised as the Coastal Preservation Gala. The transformation was spectacular. The sprawling lawn overlooking the Pacific was covered by a massive marquee tent glowing with the warmth of 1,000 amber fairy lights. A live jazz quartet played soft liquid notes that drifted over the conversation of 200 of California's wealthiest residents. Waiters in white tuxedo jackets moved like ghosts through the crowd, carrying trays of champagne and caviar, while the air smelled of expensive perfume, sea salt, and the crisp scent of money. I stood at the top of the grand staircase, looking down at the spectacle. For years, I had played the role of the beautiful hostess, wearing pastels or soft florals to complement Liam's aggressive fashion choices. Tonight, I wore black. It was a floor-length gown, architectural in its simplicity, with a sharp neckline that suggested armor rather than softness. I wore no jewelry except for my wedding ring, which felt heavier than usual on my finger, a shackle I was about to dissolve. I was not standing there as a wife. I was standing there as the executioner. "Scarlett, you look intense," a voice said beside me. It was Mrs. Vanderbilt, the chair of the charity board. She looked concerned, just focused, Eleanor, I said, offering her a practiced smile. It is a big night. We are hoping to break fundraising records. Well, your husband certainly seems to be in high spirits, she said, her eyes drifting toward the entrance. I followed her gaze. Liam had just walked in. He was wearing a midnight blue B&O suit that I knew for a fact had been charged to the Everest Urban Living corporate card 3 days ago. He looked handsome in that superficial polished way that used to make my knees weak. But tonight he just looked like a man wearing a costume he could not afford, and on his arm was Vanessa. A ripple of hushed whispers moved through the room like a breeze. Liam had introduced her to the guest list committee as an associate curator for the art installation, a lie so thin it was transparent. Vanessa was wearing a dress that was red, backless, and entirely too loud for a charity garler. She clung to Liam's arm, her eyes darting around the room, drinking in the chandeliers, the marble floors, and the faces of people she had only seen in magazines. She caught my eye from across the foyer. She smirked, a tiny, triumphant lift of her red lips. She thought she was walking into her future living room. She did not realize she was walking into a cage. I turned away and slipped through a side door into the service hallway. I made my way to the family office at the back of the house. The room was dimly lit. Standing around the heavy oak desk were the architects of Liam's downfall. Nora was there checking her watch. Harold sat with his laptop open, the blue light reflecting on his glasses. Darius stood by the door, his arms crossed, and sitting in the guest chairs were Mr. Sterling, the senior vice president of our private bank and the portfolio manager of the Green Legacy Trust. Is he here? Nora asked. He is, I said, closing the door and locking it. And he brought her. Bold, Mr. Sterling murmured, adjusting his tie. Or stupid. Both, I said. I walked over to Harold and looked at the screen. It displayed a complex dashboard of financial nodes, bank accounts, credit lines, lease agreements, and digital access keys. The trap account I asked active, Harold said. The Sierra Crest Venture Holdings account shows a balance of $5 million. It is fully visible on his mobile banking app. He has checked it 6 times in the last hour. Let him check it one more time, I said. I want him to feel rich. I want him to bid on things he cannot pay for. I looked at the clock on the wall. It was 9:30. At midnight, I said to the room, not a minute before, we let the auction run its course. Let him dig the hole deeper. And the protocols? Harold asked, ready to execute on your signal. I pulled out my phone. I opened a secure messaging app linked directly to Harold's command console. I will send one word, I said. Midnight. I left them in the shadows and returned to the light. The next 2 hours were a masterclass in dissociation. I circulated through the room, shaking hands, accepting compliments, and playing the gracious host. I watched Liam and Vanessa from the periphery. They were on the terrace, leaning over the stone balustrade, looking out at the dark ocean. I moved closer, hidden by a large floral arrangement and the noise of the band. I didn't need Darius's microphones for this. They were loud enough on their own. Can you believe this view? Liam asked, his voice slurring slightly from the scotch. He pulled his phone out. Look at that. Ness, $5 million cleared this afternoon. And that is just the beginning. The Nesser leaned in, her hand resting on his chest. It is beautiful, Liam. But you know what? It'll look even better when we redecorate this terrace. Those gargoyles are hideous. Gone, Liam promised, putting the phone back in his pocket. Everything old is going. We are going to make this place modern. Worthy of us. Worthy of us, she echoed. I walked away, grabbing a glass of champagne from a passing tray. I needed the bubbles to wash down the taste of their arrogance. By 11:00, the charity auction began. The auctioneer, a fast-talking man with a British accent, took the stage in the center of the ballroom. Ladies and gentlemen, our next item is a spectacular experience. A 2-week private charter on the Aegean Queen, sailing from Monaco to Santorini. Fully crewed, 5-star catering. Bidding starts at $20,000. 25. A voice shouted from the front. 30 shouted a tech CEO from Silicon Valley. $40,000. I saw Liam step forward into the spotlight. He held his paddle high, his chin jutting out. He wanted to be seen. He wanted everyone in this room, the people who had always looked at him as Scarlet Green's husband, to see him as a player. $50,000, Liam bellowed. The room went quiet. 50,000 was a high bid, even for this crowd. I have 50,000 from Mr. Hartley, the auctioneer said. Do I hear 55, 60? The tuxedo countered. Liam laughed, a loud booming sound. He looked back at Vanessa, who was beaming at him, clapping her hands. $75,000. Liam shouted. A gasp went through the room. I stood in the shadows near the bar, sipping my drink. Go on, Liam. Spend it. 775,000 going at once, the auctioneer called out, scanning the room, going twice. Liam looked around, arms spread wide, soaking in the attention. He looked at me across the room. He winked. It was a wink that said, I am spending your money and there is nothing you can do about it. Sold to Mr. Liam Hartley for $75,000. Applause erupted. Liam bowed theatrically. Vanessa rushed to his side, whispering something in his ear that made him grin. I looked at my watch. 11:58. I set my glass down on a cocktail table. I took my phone out of my clutch. My thumb hovered over the send button. I looked at Liam one last time. He was walking toward the bar, his arm around Vanessa, likely going to order a bottle of Dom Perignon to celebrate his victory. He looked invincible. Goodbye, Liam, I whispered. I typed the word midnight. I pressed send. I imagined the data packets flying through the air, hitting Harold's server in the back office. I imagined the code executing a silent, invisible guillotine slicing through the fiber optic cables. 11:59 at the bar. Liam was laughing at something the bartender said. He pulled out his phone, likely to check the balance again to reassure himself that the $75,000 was just a drop in his new $5 million bucket. I watched him unlock the screen. He tapped the banking app icon. From where I stood 30 feet away, I saw his body language change instantly. He froze. His smile did not fade. It simply fell off his face, replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated confusion. He tapped the screen aggressively. He swiped down to refresh. I knew exactly what he was seeing. The Sierra Crest Venture Holdings account, the one that held $5 million 30 seconds ago, was gone, vanished. The trust protocol had swept the funds back into the main vault and locked the door. But it was not just that account. His personal checking account, zero balance, frozen by the fraud alert we had triggered. His credit card's status revoked. The joint account's access denied. Liam shook the phone as if it were a physical malfunction. He looked around wildly, panic starting to set in. He turned to the bartender and slapped his platinum credit card on the counter. Run it, he snapped, his voice rising. Just run the tab. The bartender swiped the card. The little machine on the counter beeped. A harsh, dissonant tone. A red light flashed. I am sorry, Mr. Hartley, the bartender said loud enough for the people nearby to hear. It says declined pickup card. That is impossible, Liam hissed, grabbing the card back. Try it again. It is a platinum card. It has no limit. Sir, the machine says. Try it again, Liam shouted, slamming his hand on the bar. The music stopped. The jazz quartet had finished their set, and in the sudden silence, Liam's shout echoed like a gunshot. Heads turned. The whispers started again, but this time they were not about his suit. Vanessa grabbed his arm. Liam calmed down. What is going on? It is a glitch, Liam stammered, sweat glistening on his forehead. The bank is having a system error. At that exact moment, his phone rang. It was not a coincidence. Harold had timed the call. Liam looked at the screen. It is the bank, he said, relief washing over his face. See, they are calling to fix it. He answered on speakerphone, his hands shaking too much to hold it to his ear. This is Liam Hartley, he said breathlessly. Fix this immediately. I am at a gala and your system is embarrassing me. The voice that came out of the speaker was calm, professional, and devastatingly loud in the quiet room. It was Mr. Sterling speaking from the office down the hall, though Liam thought he was miles away, at a call center. Mr. Hartley. Mr. Sterling's voice projected clearly. This is a notification that per the instructions of the primary account holder and the trustees of the Green Estate, Your access privileges to all associated accounts have been permanently revoked. Art, Liam whispered. I am the primary account holder. Incorrect. Mr. Sterling said, you are an authorized user. That authorization has been rescinded due to flagged suspicious activity and a pending fraud investigation. All cards are cancelled. The lease on your vehicle has been terminated effective immediately. Please surrender any corporate assets in your possession. Scarlet, Liam yelled into the phone, his eyes scanning the room frantically. Where is Scarlet? Put her on the phone. Mrs. Green is not available. Mr. Sterling said, if you have further questions, you may contact her legal counsel. Goodbye, Mr. Hartley. The line went dead. Liam stood there holding a piece of dead plastic and a phone that was now nothing more than a paper weight. He looked strict. The expensive suit suddenly looked like it didn't fit him. The confidence was gone, replaced by the terrified look of the middle-class boy who realized he had overstayed his welcome at the palace. Vanessa stepped away from him, a subtle half-step retreat. She looked at the declined machine, then at Liam's pale face, and the calculation in her eyes was visible from across the room. She was doing the math, and the equation no longer equal a mansion. I stepped out of the shadows. I walked to the railing of the grand staircase, looking down at the bar area. The crowd parted, their eyes moving from the train wreck at the bar to the woman standing above it. Liam looked up. He saw me. Scarlet, he shouted, his voice cracking. Scarlet, tell them it is a mistake. I looked at him. I did not frown. I did not look angry. I simply looked at him with the detached curiosity of a scientist observing a specimen in a jar. I raised my champagne flute slightly in his direction. A silent toast to zero. Liam. I took a slow sip, the bubbles crisp on my tongue. Then I turned my back on him and walked toward the library, leaving him drowning in the silence of a room full of people who now knew exactly what he was worth. Nothing. Panic does strange things to the human face. Under the amber lights of the garden, I watched from the balcony as Liam's expression morphed from arrogance to the primal, twitching fear of a trapped animal. The music had stopped. The guests were murmuring, sensing the shift in atmospheric pressure and slowly filtering out toward the valet stand. But Vanessa was not retreating. She was a creature of conflict, and when cornered, she did not hide. She attacked. I saw her grab Liam by the lapels of his ruined Brion suit. She hissed something into his ear, her face contorted with urgency. Liam shook his head, looking terrified, but she dug her nails into his arm, pointing back toward the house. She was giving him the script, the final desperate play we had anticipated. They moved toward the rose garden, a secluded spot behind the trellis that Liam believed was a blind spot in our security grid. I touched my earpiece. Darius, I said calmly, they are moving to Sector 4. Is the audio feed clear? Crystal clear. Darius's voice came back deep and reassuring. I have the directional mics on them. Recording started 10 seconds ago. I walked back into the house, signaling to Nora and Harold. We retreated into the family office, a room lined with walnut bookshelves and soundproofed walls. It was the same room where my father used to negotiate labor contracts. Tonight, it will be a courtroom. We sat down. Nora placed a thick stack of legal documents on the desk. Harold opened his laptop, syncing the audio feed from the garden to the main speakers in the room. Liam's voice filled the office, breathless and shaky. I cannot do it, Ness. The police. That is going too far. Do you want to go to jail for embezzlement? The Nesser's voice was sharp, cutting through his fear. Because that is where you are headed if you do not flip the narrative right now. We need leverage. We need her discredited. Call 911 now. What do I say? Liam wed. Stick to the script we practiced. Vanessa commanded. She is hysterical. She has a knife. She threatened to kill herself and then she lunged at me. Say she is throwing glass. Make it sound like an act of emergency. If they take her in for a 72-hour cycle, we get access to the house. We can find the hard drives. We can delete the evidence. There was a pause. Then the sound of keypad tones. 911. What is your emergency? The dispatcher's voice asked. Help! Liam shouted, his voice suddenly pitching up into a theatrical panic. It is my wife. She has lost her mind. She has a knife. She is in the kitchen screaming that she is going to kill everyone. Please hurry. We are at 1200 Harbor View Drive. I sat in the leather chair, my hands folded on my lap, listening to my husband frame me for a violent felony. He really committed to the performance, Nora noted dryly, checking her watch. Police response time in this neighborhood is under 6 minutes. Let us get ready. Darius unlocked the side door for the officers when they arrived. There were two of them, Officer Miller and Officer Hernandez. They walked in with their hands resting near their holsters, scanning the room for threats. They expected a manic woman wielding a kitchen knife. Instead, they found me sitting calmly behind a mahogany desk flanked by a corporate attorney and a security specialist. There was no knife. There was no broken glass. There was only the low hum of the air conditioning and the smell of old paper. Mrs. Green, Officer Miller asked, looking confused. We received a call about a domestic disturbance involving a weapon. I understand, I said, my voice steady and low. My husband made that call. I believe he stated you were armed and threatening self-harm. Officer Hernandez said, stepping forward. Ma'am, for your safety and ours, I need to ask you to stand up and keep your hands visible. I am happy to cooperate, I said, rising slowly. But before you detain me, I would like you to look at the screen on the wall. It is very relevant to your investigation. Ma'am, we need to secure the scene first, Miller said. The scene is secure, Darius said. Stepping out of the shadows, he held up his credentials. Private security. The house is clear. There is no weapon. There never was. Miller looked at Darius, then back at me. What is going on here? A performance. I said, Harold, play the video. Harold pressed a key. The large monitor on the wall flickered to life. It showed the high-definition footage from the garage, recorded 2 days ago. Liam and Vanessa stood by the Aston Martin. Okay, let us run it again. Vanessa's voice rang out from the speakers, clear as a bell. The police will ask for specifics. Pick up a crystal tumbler and throw it, saying, I have a cut on my arm. The officers watched in silence. I saw Miller's jaw tighten as he watched Liam laugh on screen and brag about using the key to scratch his own arm to fake an injury. The suicide threat is the golden ticket, Vanessa said on the screen. That is an automatic 5,150 hold. Harold stopped the video. That was recorded 48 hours ago, I told the officers. Now, let me play you the audio from 5 minutes ago recorded in my garden. Harold clicked the next file. Call 911 now. Say she is throwing glass. Make it sound like an act of emergency. The room fell silent. The evidence was absolute. It was not. He said, she said. It was a documented conspiracy to file a false police report and abuse emergency services. Officer Hernandez looked at Officer Miller. The tension in their shoulders dropped, replaced by the heavy, annoyed look of law enforcement officers who realized they were being used as pawns in a rich man's game. Where is the caller now? Officer Miller asked, his voice significantly colder. He is in the foyer, I said, waiting for you to arrest me. Darius opened the double doors. Liam and Vanessa rushed in, putting on a show of breathless terror. Officers. Liam shouted, pointing a shaking finger at me. Thank God you are here. She is crazy. She threw a steak knife at Vanessa. Look, she is still looking at me like she wants to kill me. Vanessa huddled behind him, squeezing out fake tears. I am so scared, she whimpered. Please just get her out of here. Officer Miller did not move toward me. He turned his body squarely toward Liam. Mr. Hartley, Miller said, we have inspected the kitchen. There are no knives missing. There is no broken glass. She hid it. Liam yelled. She is manipulative. You do not know her. We also just watched a video of you in your garage 2 days ago. Officer Hernandez added, crossing his arms. Planning this exact phone call, and we heard the recording of you 5 minutes ago in the garden being instructed by this woman to lie to a 911 dispatcher. Liam froze. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. It was as if someone had pulled the plug on his animatronics. Vanessa stopped crying instantly. Her eyes darted from the officers to the screen on the wall, calculating the blast radius. That is illegal recording. Vanessa shrieked, pointing at me. You cannot record us without consent. That is inadmissible." "Actually," Nora spoke up, stepping forward with a smile that was all teeth, "this is a private residence owned by the Green Legacy Trust. All entrants sign a waiver at the gate consenting to security surveillance for liability purposes. You signed it yourself, a mess. Cole, the first time you came here to interview for a job you never had. Would you like to see the log, Mr. Hartley?" Officer Miller said, stepping into Liam's personal space. "Filing a false police report is a misdemeanor in California. Conspiracy to cause false arrest is a felony. Now, we can take a ride down to the station and discuss this. Or you can leave this property immediately and let the lawyers handle this civil dispute. But if you call 911 again tonight without a body on the floor, I will arrest you myself. Do I make myself clear?" Liam looked at the officer, then at me. He was shrinking. The bluster, the arrogance, the $5 million swagger all evaporated. Liam stammered. "I live here. You cannot kick me out of my own house." Actually, Nora interrupted again. She picked up the heavy binder from the desk and walked over to Liam. She shoved it into his chest. He instinctively grabbed it to keep it from falling. "You have been served," Nora said cheerfully. "What is this?" Liam whispered, looking down at the heavy stack of paper. "That is a petition for dissolution of marriage." Nora listed, counting on her fingers. "A notice of termination of employment from Everest Urban Living for cause, a civil suit for the recovery of embezzled funds totaling $4,300,000, and a temporary restraining order barring you from coming within 100 yards of any Green Trust asset, including this house." Liam stared at the papers. He looked like he was trying to read a foreign language. "You fired me," he choked out, looking at me. "I audited you." I corrected him. "The firing is just a formality." Vanessa, realizing the ship was sinking and she was not on the manifest, tried a different tactic. She turned to the officers, her eyes wide. "I am a victim here," she cried out. "She locked us in. The gates are closed. She is holding me against my will. That is false imprisonment." Darius did not even speak. He just tapped the keyboard. The screen changed to footage from the front gate, taken 3 hours ago. It showed Vanessa driving her Aston Martin up to the valet, handing over the keys, and walking confidently into the party. "You arrived voluntarily," Darius said, his voice deep and bored. "The front gate is open. The valet are gone, but your keys are on the table in the foyer. You are free to leave. In fact, we insist on it." Officer Miller looked at Vanessa with undisguised contempt. "Ma'am, unless you want to add making a second false report to tonight's activities, I suggest you take the exit." The officers turned to me. Officer Miller tipped his hat slightly. "This is Green," he said. "We will file a report on the false call. If you wish to press charges for the conspiracy, your lawyer knows where to find us." "Good night." "Thank you, officers," I said. They walked out, their boots echoing on the hardwood floor. The heavy front door clicked shut behind them. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. There were no more police to protect them, no more guests to witness their glory, no more lies to hide behind. It was just me, Liam, and Vanessa. Liam stood clutching the divorce papers, his knuckles white. Vanessa stood a few feet away, her red dress looking garish under the office lights. She looked at Liam, waiting for him to fix it. But he was broken. I walked around the desk. I did not yell. I did not throw things. I simply stood there in my black dress, looking at the two people who had tried to turn me into a ghost in my own life. "Darius," I said softly, "please bring the car keys." Darius placed 2 key fobs on the desk, the key to my sedan and the key to the Aston Martin. "We are moving to the final phase," I said to Liam, my voice devoid of any warmth. "We are done with the police. Now it is just us and the truth." I pointed to the door. "Outside," I commanded. "On the steps, I want to watch you leave." Liam looked up at me, his eyes wet. He opened his mouth to say my name, perhaps to beg, perhaps to apologize. "Do not," I said, cutting him off with a sharp look. "Save your breath. You are going to need it for the walk." The last guest had departed 20 minutes ago. The catering staff had packed away the crystal flutes and the silver trays, retreating out the back service entrance. The jazz band had packed up their instruments and vanished into the night. Now the Harborview mansion was silent, save for the rhythmic drumming of a light rain against the massive bay windows. The amber lights in the grand foyer were dimmed to a low glow, casting long, dramatic shadows across the marble floor. I sat in a high-backed velvet armchair in the center of the room, my hands resting calmly on the armrests. I crossed my legs, the slit of my black dress falling open slightly. To my left stood Darius, his arms crossed over his chest, a silent sentinel. To my right stood Nora, holding a clipboard like a weapon. Standing in front of me, looking like wet, shivering dogs, were Liam and Vanessa. They looked small without the audience, without the police to manipulate, and without the illusion of the $5 million I had snatched back. They were just two grifters who had run out of road. "This is not a negotiation," I said, my voice echoing slightly in the vast empty space. "This is a sentencing hearing." Liam took a step forward, his hands trembling. "Scarlett, please. Can we just go upstairs and talk, just you and me, without the lawyers, without the bodyguards?" "You do not live upstairs anymore, Liam," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "In fact, you do not work for me anymore, and you certainly do not bank with me anymore." I looked at Nora. She stepped forward and read from the document in her hand. "As of midnight tonight," Nora announced, her voice crisp and professional, "Liam Hartley has been terminated from his position as CEO of Everest Urban Living for gross misconduct. All corporate access cards are void. All company vehicles are reported as reclaimed. All salary and severance packages are forfeited pending the restitution of $4,300,000 in misappropriated funds." "You cannot do that," Vanessa shouted, her voice shrill and desperate. "He has a contract, and we have rights to this house. He told me he owns half of it." She turned to Liam, grabbing his arm. "Tell her, Liam, tell her about the joint tenny paper she signed." I let out a low, dry laugh. It was a sound that made Liam flinch. "The papers I signed," I said, leaning forward, "granted him honorary stewardship of the garden. They were not legal title deeds, Vanessa, they were expensive scrap paper." I stood up slowly. I walked toward them, the heels of my shoes clicking sharply on the marble. "And as for this house," I said, sweeping my hand around the foyer, "you two seem to be under the impression that this is marital property. That is a common mistake for people who do not read the fine print." I stopped directly in front of Vanessa. She smelled of fear and stale champagne. "This mansion has never belonged to me, and it certainly never belonged to Liam," I explained, speaking slowly so she would understand every word. "It is owned by the Green Legacy Trust. My father wrote the bylaws 20 years ago, and there is a very specific clause regarding occupancy." I recited the words from memory, watching the color drain from Vanessa's face. "In the event that the primary beneficiary files a petition for dissolution of marriage, any spousal residency privileges are immediately and automatically revoked. Not in 30 days, not after the trial, immediately." Vanessa looked at Liam. "You lied to me," she whispered. "You said we would have the house. You said we would kick her out." "He lied to everyone." "Vanessa," I said, including himself. I reached into the pocket of my dress and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was the print out of the email Liam had sent to his lawyer, the checklist of assets he wanted to steal. "Here," I said, handing it to Vanessa. "Read item number 4. Vanessa took the paper with shaking hands. She read it aloud, her voice barely a whisper. "Harborview Mansion, primary residence rights, note. Vanessa needs this property for her brand image." She looked up at Liam, betrayal swimming in her eyes. But I was not done. "Keep reading," I said. "The second paragraph." Vanessa squinted at the text. "Subject to liquidation. Once title is secured, intent is to leverage the property for a cash-out refinance to fund the cent. Trope acquisition, leaving the mistress with the rental unit in the city." Vanessa gasped. She dropped the paper as if it were burning her skin. She turned to Liam, her eyes wide with shock. "The rental unit," she screeched. "You were going to dump me in a rental. You told me we were partners. You told me I was the love of your life. It was a financial strategy," Liam stammered, backing away from her. "Ness, you do not understand how these things work. I understand perfectly, I interrupted. He was using you, Vanessa, just like he was using me. He did not want a wife, and he did not want a girlfriend. He wanted a bank. Liam fell to his knees. It was a pathetic theatrical gesture, but this time there was no audience to applaud him. He crawled toward me, grabbing the hem of my dress. "Scarlet, please," he sobbed, tears streaming down his face. I was weak. She tempted me. She made me do it. I never wanted to hurt you. I love you. You are the only woman I have ever loved. I looked down at him. 10 years ago, I had thought this man was my savior. Now he was just a stain on my floor. "Get up," I said coldly. He looked up at me, hope flickering in his wet eyes. "You will give me a chance. Can we fix this counseling, please? Scarlet, do not throw away 7 years." I looked him dead in the eye. "Answer one question for me, Liam," I said softly, "and be honest for the first time in your life." He nodded frantically. "Anything? Anything. Did you ever love me?" I asked. "More than you loved the balance in my bank account." The silence that followed was absolute. He opened his mouth. He closed it. He looked for a lie, a spin, a story to tell. But under the weight of my gaze, and with the ruin of his life crashing down around him, he could not find the words. He looked down at the floor. That was my answer. "I thought so," I said. I stepped back, pulling my dress from his grasp. "Darius," I commanded, "execute the eviction." Darius stepped forward, his massive frame blocking the light. "Mr. Hartley, Miss Cole, it is time to go." "I need to pack," Liam cried, scrambling to his feet. "My clothes, my watches, my computer." "No," I said. I walked back to the chair and sat down. "You leave with what is on your back," I declared. "Your personal effects will be boxed up by a third-party forensic accounting team. Once we have determined which items were purchased with your salary and which were purchased with embezzled funds, we will ship the remainder to an address of your choosing, assuming you have an address." "This is illegal," Vanessa shouted. She grabbed her bright red handbag from the console table where she had left it. "I am taking my things, Darius," I said. Darius moved faster than a man his size should be able to. He gently but firmly took the red bag from Vanessa's hands. "Hey," she screamed. "That is mine. That is a Chanel." "Actually," I said, checking my nails, "that bag was purchased on February 14th in Miami using the Everest Urban Living Corporate Amex transaction ID 4922. It is classified as corporate property and evidence in a criminal investigation. Thank you for returning it." Vanessa stood there, mouth agape, her hands empty. "My car," Liam pleaded. "At least let me take the Estam." I put the down payment down with stolen funds, nor interjected. "The dealership has already been notified of the fraud. They are coming to tow it in the morning. You can leave the keys on the table." Liam reached into his pocket and pulled out the heavy crystal key fob. He looked at it one last time, the symbol of the life he thought he was entitled to. Then, with a shaking hand, he placed it on the marble table. It made a hollow clack sound. "Out," I said. Darius placed a hand on Liam's shoulder and another on Vanessa's arm. He did not shove them, but the pressure was undeniable. He guided them toward the massive oak front doors. Darius opened the doors. The sound of the rain filled the foyer. It was not a storm, just a cold, steady drizzle, the kind that soaks you to the bone in seconds. "Wait," Liam said, stopping on the threshold. He patted his pockets. "My phone." "My wallet." "You have your phone." I said, "but the service plan was under the company bundle. It has been suspended, and your wallet contains cards that no longer work. Good luck calling a ride." Darius gave them a final nudge. They stumbled out onto the wet stone steps. The heavy doors groaned as Darius swung them shut. The thud of the latch locking was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of a book closing. I stood up and walked to the staircase. I climbed the stairs slowly, my hand gliding along the banister. I walked down the hallway to the master bedroom and stepped out onto the balcony that overlooked the driveway. Below, under the pale yellow light of the street lamps, I saw them. Liam and Vanessa stood in the rain. They had no umbrellas. They had 2 cheap suitcases that Darius had tossed out after them, filled only with their oldest non-designer clothes. I watched as Liam pulled out his phone. The screen lit up his wet face in a ghostly blue. He tapped it furiously. Then he tapped it again. He held it up to the sky, searching for a signal, searching for a credit card that would not decline. He slumped. He turned to Vanessa. She screamed something at him, her gestures wild and angry. She shoved him. He shoved her back. They were wet, broke, and stranded in a neighborhood where the nearest bus stop was 3 miles away. I looked down at them, expecting to feel triumph. I expected to feel a surge of vindictive joy, but I felt nothing. No, that was not true. I felt light. I felt lighter than I had in 7 years. The anxiety, the suspicion, the constant weight of trying to be enough for a man who was a bottomless pit. It was all gone. I took a deep breath of the cool, rainy air. It smelled of eucalyptus and sea salt. It smelled like freedom. I turned my back on the balcony. I walked back into my bedroom. On the nightstand sat a stack of papers that Nora had left for me. It was the deed of transfer for the Silveroid Ridge project. I sat down on the edge of the bed. I picked up a pen. I was not going to cancel the project. I was going to repurpose it. I signed the bottom of the page. Authorized Scarlet Green memo. Transfer of projected profits to the Henry Green Scholarship Fund for Underprivileged Architecture Students. I kept the pen. I had lost a husband, but I had regained my life. I had lost some money, but I had bought my dignity back. I turned off the lamp. The room went dark, safe and quiet. Down on the street, the rain kept falling on two people who used to matter, but now they were just shadows in the rear-view mirror of a car that was speeding toward a much brighter future. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Please leave a comment below sharing your city or country so we can connect. If you enjoyed seeing justice served, please subscribe to the Azad Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button so more people can hear this story.